Hello, everybody. Today's first review is going to be of Civil War. Now, this film, it was actually between this and Ungentlemanly Warfare when I was down in South Carolina a couple years ago to go see at an AMC theater in the States, and I chose this one. It was just me and my dad, so yeah, we chose this movie to go and see, and sorry, we chose the other movie to go and see because we thought we would like it a little bit more than this one, but this one was on my list. It's been on my list for a while, and I finally got to sit down and watch it. So yeah, this film will make you feel a whole bunch of different emotions, and it's very tense and intense in most of the film, and it's kind of like one of those what if ones, like, because it's supposed to be based on like a modern day Civil War, so it was a very unique look at, like, I guess, like what could potentially, like, a what if this happened sort of thing, you know what I mean? um but yeah, it was interesting to see, like, what route they were going to take. Like, was the president going to win and take out the forces that were after him, or were the forces that were after him going to become so strong that there was nothing he could really do? It almost kind of reminded me of, like if you've ever played the original Modern Warfare 2, like the campaign there, it reminded me of the one level at the very end of the movie where they're like storming the White House, but in this sense, they're actually after the president instead of, protecting what we had, right? But yeah, we'll go over the cast list because it was a pretty, like, as far as like new, like, it had some new actors in it that have been definitely making a name for themselves too recently. So yeah, we'll go over the cast list for sure. So Kirsten Dunst, who played Lee, and I haven't seen her in anything in quite some time, so it was actually nice to see her in another movie. Wagner Moura, who played Joel, who was like her partner basically. So they were both journalists and or press, I guess they referred to themselves more as. But yeah, they were journalists basically, kind of just taking photos and photographing so on and so forth of like everything that was going on. And it looked to me like she had been doing it for quite some time because she was having flashbacks at one point in the movie of like all of the different war zones, they called them, that she had been to. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened to her obviously over the years that, messed her up a little bit. And you would have to have um quite a like, I don't know, you have to be kind of numb to everything, right, to do that kind of a job, because you're watching a lot of death obviously take place a lot of the time, and you just have to be kind of numb to it, I guess, in order to do that kind of job, because she was on the front lines quite a bit. So yeah, it would be a very intense job, and you'd always be, probably most people would probably be scared about losing their lives, but she seemed to be right in it most of the time. Kaylee Spaney, yeah, Spaney, yeah, or Spanny, maybe. Anyway, played Jesse. Nick Offerman was the president, and I'd never seen him in a role quite like that before. So yeah, it was interesting to see him in a role like that. Stephen McKinley Henderson played Sammy, who was also another journalist, I guess, kind of like a rival to them, but he also joins them. So it was Lee, Joel, Jesse, and Sammy that ended up going on this adventure to Washington, D.C. together, and then their plans obviously got a little foiled with what was taking place as they went along, but I mean, they still got quite a good bit of photographs and stuff done. So yeah, I would say it wasn't like a complete wash for them, but it didn't go the way they had expected, obviously, right? Jesse Plemons, who played a soldier. Now, I'm not really sure exactly what side he was on. There's so many different, like, obviously we had uh, like the Western forces, and then I believe the other one was, what did the president call it? The Florida Alliance. So there could have been many different, like, I guess, small military groups popping up all over the place. And yeah, again, who knows what side everybody was kind of on, or whether it was just kind of gotten to a certain point now that everybody was just like, okay, well, we can kind of do whatever we want under the radar while there's a bigger situation going on. I think maybe that was kind of where Jesse Plemons' character was at. Nelson Lee, who played Tony, and then Evan Lai, who played Bohai. So they were friends of Joel's, I guess, who he had told about back in New York about where they were going, and eventually they just kind of followed them. So yeah, and this was after a pretty intense situation where they were getting sniped at from a house. And that's what I think they would, I believe, like the situation that was set up in the film, they would call like the kill box, right? So as soon as they moved into it, the guy just started taking shots. And of course, they had two soldiers that, fortunately, that were on their side that were also trying to take out this guy. So I'm not sure exactly how long he had been there, but clearly they had been in a bit of a standoff for quite some time, from the sounds of it anyway. Then we had Sonia, oh my god, Maluno, who played Anya, and then Jefferson White, who played Dave. So they were also other press, uh, other press or journalists that they end up meeting along the way when they get closer to the front lines in Charlottesville. So yeah, there was there was a lot going on in this film that was and quite a few like intense moments for sure. But yeah, this was a very good film, and the soundtrack was unique, but it was very fitting for this film. Like made you feel for the characters, and I feel like a lot of movies have a very hard time making you connect with the characters in a short period because 2.5 hours, I think, was the runtime on this movie, or somewhere around there. Actually, I think it was only an hour and 40 minutes, so it might have been closer to a 2 hour runtime. It was somewhere around 2 hours. I can't remember the exact runtime, but yeah, it wasn't a long movie. So an hour and a half, 2 hours to really get you connected with characters is hard to do. But this movie made you feel for those people because they are putting themselves at risk just to get a little glimpse into what's going on, right? Um, so in the very beginning of the film, you can see the president making an announcement about the military, saying that the military has defeated the Western forces and the Florida Alliance. Now, whether there's any truth to that, I don't know, because it kind of seems like most of the other people that were on the ground could see that maybe the president wasn't necessarily telling the whole truth. And it seems like maybe those two, uh, I don't really like military factions, were just slowed down for the time being and not really put to rest completely because obviously if the president thought they were a threat, right, like they must have been pretty big by that point to in order to cause like a civil war, which is crazy, right? um so we see Lee meet Jesse, I guess, in this crowded area where there's rioters fighting like the police and so on and so forth, and then somebody strapped with a bomb runs into the crowd, and there was some sort of, I don't know, like truck sitting there too that was maybe filled with some sort of gas or something. It must have been filled with something because when the person runs in and everything blows up, it was a pretty big explosion. Now, again, maybe not the most realistic because somehow just being behind the car was enough to save them. But again, I mean, if that was the only thing that I noticed in this movie that didn't seem realistic, I would say, yeah, that's pretty good. Um, Other than that, like most of this was like, oh my god, like this is pretty intense. What's going on? So yeah, I will say that. And then of course, that was probably my only thing with the movie. I was like, that seemed like a fairly big explosion to have somebody make it out of that. Obviously, like totally unscathed, right? Like they didn't have any marks on them, and that was just from sitting behind the car. And they weren't that far away from the explosion, so I'm not sure. But again, I'm not an explosives expert, so I guess I can't really say what the range on that would have been. But anyhow, it does obviously take out a lot of people, and then Lee takes a photo of everybody that's been affected by it, and then Jesse takes a photo of her taking photos of everybody else. So yeah, it was kind of cool to see like the contrast in the photos sometimes for sure. And then they're all staying at this hotel, and Jesse tracks her down again. And then I guess after she goes to bed, her buddy Joel and all of them talk, and the next day it's her, Sammy, Joel, and Jesse that end up going on this adventure together. Now, originally, their plan was to go to DC and, I guess, photograph and interview the president. That was what they were planning to do. And of course, obviously, as they get closer, things get way more out of hand. Like little pockets of these resistance keep popping up, so they end up kind of going off their path. and getting shots of them, of course. And yeah, it just seemed like it was almost like two military forces kind of facing one another, even though, obviously one military force seemed much stronger than the other in the beginning. It seemed that the Western forces were able to kind of, yeah, like, the Western forces were kind of able to like regroup and grow stronger once again in order to eventually take out the president, which is quite crazy. Yeah, just to watch that all happen. So yeah, like I said, Jesse joins them. Obviously, as they're getting closer to DC, things start to become a lot more chaotic. Again, like um, with them running into the pockets of resistance and then filming them, so on and so forth. And then eventually, it gets to the point where what was it, Tony and Bohai end up meeting with them, and then he kind of jokes like seeing them in DC, and then Bohai and Tony end up getting shot after this tense moment with Jesse Plemons' character as the soldier there, and it seems like he's just kind of killing people for sport, really, or killing people because they're not American enough in his eyes. So he's asking them all where they're born, and when Tony answers, he ends up just shooting him because Tony says Hong Kong. So he clearly doesn't. He clearly has a very narrow view of who's American, who's not, right? Because yeah, even if you were like, if you come from Hong Kong and you're there legally, it's just a wild thing to see that kind of behavior from somebody. But anyhow, I guess maybe it was it almost kind of reminded me of like the Purge in that scene where he's just like, I'm killing you for this reason and I don't really have to justify it. And then, of course, obviously, they're Joel's friends, right? So he starts to get a little upset. And then Sammy comes in and hits, I believe it was him with the car, and somehow knocks Jesse into like the pile of bodies too. So yeah, it's just a very messy scene. And then, of course, unfortunately, Sammy somehow in that altercation ended up getting shot. I'm not sure how or when. It all just happened so fast that you're like, okay, well, I'm not exactly sure when he would have gotten shot, but somehow he did. So unfortunately, by the time they make it to Charlottesville, where Sammy had wanted to go, Sammy was unfortunately dead by that point. So he kind of made it there for no reason. And then, at least that's what Joel says, because by the time they get there themselves, right, to Charlottesville, to like the front lines where the Western forces are, they find out that the Western forces are slowly moving in on the president anyway, so they're not going to be able to get like their interview and photographs like they had wanted that entire time, which is wild. Like, it's just crazy how much things changed within like the few days they had been traveling from New York to DC. So yeah, absolutely crazy. And then the final battle scene there, where all of the Western forces are moving in on the president and they're just taking out everybody. Like, it was like an absolute war zone from like the moment they helicoptered in to like all to like them getting to like the White House. So yeah, and then of course it was kind of like a weird like comedic moment when they were in the house and they're like, the leader there of the Western forces was like, yeah, just bring out the president, we'll take really good care of him, because I think the one secretary, maybe it was a secretary of defense, I'm not exactly sure, one of the secretaries in there was like in the room, and she said she was unarmed, which she clearly wasn't, and then says, we just want safe passage for the president, can we put him in your hands? Of course, that's not why they were there. They were there to take out the president, and eventually that's what they did. Um, Unfortunately, though, Lee ends up getting shot too. Now, I'm assuming she was shot and killed because she goes to save Jesse, who probably put herself in a pretty bad situation with like the Secret Service agent in the hallway. And I think Lee could see that she was about to get shot herself and puts herself in harm's way. And of course, early on in the movie, Lee had said about, how it would be on her conscience if Jesse ended up getting like killed in any sort of way. And Jesse said to her, like, would you take a photo of me after I had died? And she said, what do you think? Meaning, yes, she would. So as Lee's getting shot and she's falling, Jesse ends up taking like a few photos of her as she's dying. So it was kind of like a a weird poetic moment in that, because it was like, you know, Jesse probably didn't even realize what she was doing. She was just so caught up in the moment and taking the photos that she was like, okay, well, I guess I have to photograph this. It's happening right in front of me. Um, so yeah, the Western forces even had like their own military base. So the president did bring up like something about them having like their own government. So it's almost seems like this like the states are divided at this point, right? Like one side has their government and then everybody else just kind of follows the president. So yeah, that would be what civil war is, right? Like you're creating your own. I don't know if you would really want to create your own government though, because it seems like to me that wouldn't really be true freedom, right? You're just kind of creating the same system that you're trying to take down. But I mean, maybe, maybe he was just trying to. Maybe he was just saying that so that it would look more like they were the enemy than anything else. I don't really know. But anyhow, yeah, there's a lot to speculate in this film, I guess. But yeah, so eventually the Western forces do take out the president. Um, and that's pretty much how the movie ends. But it was a powerful film, um, for sure. And obviously, some very unfortunate deaths like Sammy and Lee along the way. But I think they knew that that could potentially be what would happen. And the one really strange scene in this movie was one of the towns that they traveled through seemed almost peaceful. Of course, it was still guarded with like armed guards and stuff on the roofs. But I mean, I guess the town that they were in like knew about what was going on outside of it, but they just chose to kind of ignore it and just live their lives normally. So I guess nobody is ever really going to bother you, right? If you're neutral, if you're not really paying attention to what's going on and you're neutral, and there's no threat to anybody else, why would anybody even go and touch you, right? Sort of thing. So yeah, just a lot of different. Just a lot of different things that were happening throughout the film that were like, okay, this is pretty powerful, like some people choose to ignore it. Obviously, some people choose to get involved, like on the front lines. And then you've got like your people who are just creating kind of like their own little, I would say, factions along the way, or, groups along the way. So yeah, it was just interesting to see like uh, all the different things happening, while there was a huger, while there was a uh, bigger thing happening at the same time. I don't really know the right words, I guess, to describe that. But anyhow, yeah, soundtrack was very unique and fitting, and I've actually added a few of the songs from the movie to my movie music playlist on Spotify. So yeah, just fit. The music just fits so well and fit with the emotion of the scene that they were trying to capture, right? So, but there's a lot of moments in this film that, if you're a little bit squeamish, might make you turn your eyes, because they didn't hold back, that's for sure, with the what ifs in this movie. So yeah, but really good movie. Highly recommend watching it. I gave it a 9 out of 10 if I didn't already say that. And I will see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.